Nazi Germany murdered 6 million Jews and millions of other people during the Holocaust. Their history is preserved in part by those who survived. Less than 50,000 of them remain in the U.S., and their stories are especially important now when we're seeing a disturbing rise in anti-Semitism. Today, in a statement, President Biden said, quote, "Across our country, we are seeing swastikas on cars, anti-Semitic banners on bridges, verbal and physical attacks against Jewish businesses and Jewish Americans, even Holocaust denialism. It's vile. It goes against everything we value as Americans." Holocaust survivors will not live forever, but the Illinois Holocaust Museum is making sure their stories will. Through virtual reality and immersive storytelling on the eve of Holocaust Remembrance Day, NBC's Maura Barrett gives us a closer look at this new technology. And just a warning, some of what you're about to see may be disturbing.
I'm hoping the young people are going to grow up and be strong and not allow these kind of tragedies to happen again.
Fritzi was one of the millions of Jews persecuted during World War II. And despite passing in 2021, she continues to share her story with students every day in the Illinois Holocaust Museum's virtual reality exhibit. Opportunities to speak with living Holocaust survivors is dwindling as the population ages. It's estimated that less than 50,000 living survivors remain in the U.S.
And you mentioned the eating of clay.
Clay.
Well, we did too. It was a gray clay.
Yes.
I remember, yeah. All I know is it filled you up.
The Illinois Holocaust Museum is working diligently with remaining survivors like George Brent and Gary Berkovich to preserve their stories through different educational avenues. These two survivors were as eager to learn about each other's journeys just as they were to share their own.
On May the 20th, 1944, we were the last vestige of Hungarian or Jews that were deported and taken to concentration camps. The train stopped for a moment, and my father looked through the barbed wire window, and it says Auschwitz. I never heard of it. Today it's a household word. When I got off the train, I couldn't say goodbye to my mother and my brother. I saw them getting off the train. And that's the last I saw of them. Later on, I knew that all women who had small children and wouldn't give up the child, even though they were able to work, were immediately taken and gassed.
George and his father were forced to work at Auschwitz. He was then transported to various camps and managed to avoid selections. But despite that, George witnessed many atrocities, like abuse and starvation.
There was the famous or infamous camp called Mauthausen, an awful place. But they killed people by overwork them, by having to climb up those stairs, some 96 stairs, every day after day after day, carrying these huge 50-pound boulders on their backs. Most of the people who've been there in Auschwitz or Birkenau for a while looked emaciated. You could count their bones without them taking their clothes off.
My experience is very different from the George. He was not that lucky as I was, because I was born much later and I was in a different country.
Gary was born in Kharkiv, Ukraine in 1935, hundreds of miles away from George. When the war reached Gary, he and his family were forced to flee.
During that time, I experienced very horrible stuff. Our train was bombed.
He details his experience in Never Heard, Never Forget. The book puts a spotlight on Holocaust survivors from the former Soviet Union.
We were put in a teeny dugout, a hole in the ground slightly larger than the kitchen of our Kharkov apartment, and slightly deeper than the grandfather height.
And when his family moved to Turkestan, Gary says poverty was widespread amongst Jewish refugees, so much so that they starved to death.
So every morning I saw a picture like that. It was a two-wheel car. They were collecting dead bodies, put them in a cart, and went to nearby ravine, and they put them there in a massive grave. Imagine someone was 6.5, 7 years old, seeing all this. Sometimes when I do remember, I may cry.
Gary eventually returned back to Kharkiv a few years later and helped rebuild the city as an architect. His work, however, was damaged this past year because of the war.
It was in 1953 when I just started. I was 18 years old. And this picture shows this building just a couple of months ago after Russians shelled that building.
What's it like to see Kharkiv in the same state now as it was when you left when you were a kid?
Quite frankly, when I saw it first, I cried because it was, everything was together was wrong. But I
this was your building?
Yeah.
Like Gary, George's story will also live forever through the museum's virtual reality exhibit.
Perhaps I should cry, but it's done so well, and it's so amazing that I am sitting there in awe to see myself on the screen and all the places that I've been to. I am not forever, but the film may be here forever, or for at least for a very, very long time.
Kelly Zaney is the museum's senior vice president of education and exhibitions. She says that this kind of immersive education is necessary, especially as anti-Semitic hate crimes rise across the U.S.
It helps us understand that the Holocaust is one of the most ultimate examples of man inhumanities to man, of what ultimately can happen if anti-Semitism is taken too far.
The museum's use of voice recognition technology with holograms like Fritzy's will allow visitors to interact with survivors for decades to come.
Fritzy, what do you want your legacy to be?
I'm hoping that there are lessons that are learned from Holocaust survivors and from the past. I am hoping that there will be a better world. I'm hoping that I'm leaving a good world for my grandchildren, your grandchildren, and all the young people that deserve to be raised in a good world.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.